November 5, 1881. The gilded hall of the sublime port, Constantinople. Sunlight, fractured by intricate lattice windows, falls across a document that will strangle an empire. The only sound is the heavy drag of a signet ring through crimson wax. Grand Vizier Kusuksed Pasha does not meet the eyes of the men opposite him. Their faces, British, French, Dutch, Italian, are studies in detached satisfaction. No cannons roar outside these walls, yet this is a surrender more profound than any battlefield defeat. You are witnessing a coronation of creditors. With this seal, the Ottoman Empire officially transfers the keys to its treasury to foreign bankers. The sick man of Europe has been placed in a financial hospice, and his doctors have just claimed power of attorney. This quiet humiliation was decades in the making. To understand this moment, picture the empire a generation earlier, a vast, antiquated organism struggling to adapt. Sultans pursued modern armies, telegraph lines, and railroads to compete with European powers, but their coffers were bled dry by corruption and endless wars. The solution shimmered from the financial capitals of the West: loans. Rivers of capital flowed from London and Paris to the Bosphorus, each wave of gold burying the sublime port under deeper layers of compound interest. The empire borrowed not to prosper, but to survive, using new debts to service old ones, a drowning man drinking the very sea that engulfed him. Lenders like the Imperial Ottoman Bank, a creature of Franco-British finance, were not mere bankers. They were architects of dependency. Each loan came with invisible strings: a concession for a railway here, control of a customs district there, a monopoly on tobacco or salt. The Ottoman economy was not being developed. It was being itemized, appraised, and pledged as collateral. Independence eroded with every promissory note. The inevitable crash came in 1875. The government announced it could no longer pay its foreign bondholders. In the parlors of Mayfair and the boulevards of Paris, it was a financial scandal. In Constantinople, it was a national mortification. The European powers, their investing classes demanding restitution, moved beyond diplomacy. They demanded control. This brings us back to the sealed decree of 1881, the Decree of Muharrem. This document created a sovereign entity within the empire, the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, OPDA. Run by a council of European appointees, the OPDA wielded direct extraterritorial power. It seized entire revenue streams, taxes on salt, tobacco, fisheries, and silk. It employed its own army of Ottoman tax collectors, loyal not to the Sultan but to foreign balance sheets. The empire retained its palaces, its titles, and its illusions, but its economic lifeblood now pumped through a foreign heart. For Britain, the globe's paramount naval power, this financial machinery was a perfect instrument. It provided calm, legal leverage over the strategic pathways to India. Every piastre logged by the OPDA was a brick in a road that would lead, inexorably, to the conquest of geography itself. October 9, 1904. A perilous cut in the Taurus Mountains, Anatolia. Dynamite blasts shudder the very bedrock, and the air tastes of shattered stone and ambition. Here, in this man-made gorge, Ottoman and German engineers oversee hundreds of laborers chiseling a path for history. This is the Berlin to Baghdad Railway, and its steam whistles scream a challenge to the established order. Far from this dust, in a plush London club, men in tailored suits study maps, their concern not geology but geopolitics. The ledger books of the OPDA were a leash, and Germany was attempting to slip it. Imperial Germany's arrival on the Ottoman stage was a tectonic shift. Kaiser Wilhelm II envisioned an empire connected by steel, a Drang Nak Osten that would bypass British sea lanes and open the markets of the East. For Sultan Abdul Hamid II, Germany was a thrilling new patron, a powerful counterweight to the overbearing British and French. The railway concession was more than infrastructure. It was a dream of strategic emancipation, a chance to break the financial shackles of the debt administration by partnering with a rising power. The sound of German hammers in Anatolia, however, was heard as a declaration of economic war in the city of London. The British establishment perceived the Baghdad Railway as a direct threat to its lifeline to India and its dominance of the Persian Gulf. More immediately, it risked reviving Ottoman fortunes and diminishing British financial control. A new, more subtle campaign of constriction began. Britain, leveraging its dominant position within the OPDA, turned the bureaucracy of debt into a weapon. Revenue streams earmarked for the Sultan's treasury, and thus potentially for German kilometric guarantees, were scrutinized, delayed, or diverted under the pretext of servicing the prior, sacred foreign debt. It was a masterclass in financial jujitsu. using the empire's own obligations to stall its only hope of independence. While Britain applied financial pressure from within, it moved to physically secure the railway's terminus. The Persian Gulf, that shallow, strategic sea, became the object of intense British courtship. Naval squadrons showed the flag with new frequency. Political agents, men like the shrewd Percy Cox, took up residence in the ports of Kuwait, Bahrain, and the Trucial States. They offered local sheiks formal protection treaties, annual subsidies, and support against Ottoman claims. The exchange was clear: British control of foreign policy in return for security and gold. These peninsula principalities, whose ties to Constantinople were often nominal, were meticulously peeled from the Ottoman orbit, not by invasion, but by persuasive diplomacy and calibrated pressure. Back in Constantinople, the young Turk government that seized power in 1908 found itself in an impossible bind. Enthusiasm for the German alliance ran high, yet the railway project was perpetually starved of funds, hamstrung by the very financial controls Britain managed. The empire was now ensnared in a vice, indebted to competing imperial visions. The original debt trap had evolved. It was no longer just a mechanism for collecting interest, but a framework for managing imperial decline and boxing out rivals. Britain, with cold precision, was using the Ottoman ledger to isolate the empire's heartland, ensuring that when the final crisis came, the pieces would fall into predetermined hands. The stage was not set for renewal, but for a dissolution where Britain held the most convincing claims. August 5, 1914. A secure telegraph room, British Foreign Office, London. The staccato rhythm of enciphered traffic provides a frantic heartbeat to the room. War has erupted across the channel. For the men plotting strategy in this hushed space, a crucial calculation now moves to the top of the page: the Ottoman Empire. It is not yet a belligerent, but its German ties are undeniable. A treasury official lays a detailed ledger before the group. Its columns of figures representing the Ottoman sovereign debt are no longer mere financial data. They are a legal and moral blueprint for dismemberment. A web of credit spun over 33 years is about to become a net for capturing continents. In Constantinople, the young Turk leadership, Enver, Talat, and Cemal Pashas, face a desperate calculus. Berlin promises a bold rewrite, abolition of the humiliating capitulations, support for full sovereignty, and a partnership of equals. The Entente's offer is the grim status quo of the debt administration. The choice, framed as one between dignity and servitude, pushes them over the edge. On a late October night, Ottoman warships, their decks manned by German crews, shell Russian ports on the Black Sea. The point of no return is passed in a flash of naval gunfire. Britain's retaliation is instantaneous and financial. All Ottoman assets in British banks are frozen solid. The OPDA, that parallel government of accountants, is seized by its British and French directors. Overnight, its purpose transforms from debt collection to economic warfare. The revenue streams it controls, the lifeblood of salt, tobacco, and silk taxes, are now diverted, dammed up, or poisoned at the source. The Ottoman economy, already fragile, suffers a hemorrhage from which it cannot recover. But London goes a critical step further. It declares that by joining the Central Powers, the Ottoman state has committed an act of default against its allied creditors. This technical financial ruling is a political thunderclap. It morally annuls Britain's obligations as a banker and frames the coming territorial conquest as rightful repossession. In the map rooms of the War Office and the India Office, men like Sir Mark Sykes and Sir Percy Cox now work with a liberated clarity. Their maps of the Levant and Mesopotamia are overlaid with the ghostly columns of the old Ottoman ledgers. Which province, once severed, could best settle the outstanding account? The wheat fields of Mosul, the date groves of Basra. The potential oil seeps near Kirkuk? Each region is assessed not for its people or history, but for its capacity to liquidate a historical debt. This cold arithmetic becomes the engine of British policy. It fuels the correspondence with Sharif Hussein of Mecca, encouraging an Arab revolt with grand, ambiguously worded promises of independence, promises made with a knowing glance between London bureaucrats. It provides the foundational logic for the Sykes-Picot Agreement, that secret 1916 pact where Britain and France carved the Ottoman East into spheres of control, drawing borders with no regard for tribal allegiances or human geography, only for resources and strategic routes. For public consumption, the narrative is meticulously crafted. The Ottomans, feckless debtors, and cruel tyrants have forfeited their right to rule through financial and military failure. Their land is the collateral we are now, with solemn duty, compelled to claim. By 1917, as General Allenby's cavalry enters Jerusalem and General Maud's infantry secures Baghdad, the military campaign feels like a formality. The real victory had been won in the ledger books. The guns provided the force, but the unpaid debt provided the unassailable argument. November 11, 1918. A gray dawn on the Bosphorus. A spectral fleet of Allied dreadnoughts sits at anchor in the Sea of Marmara, their guns silent but implicit. Aboard the HMS Superb, Admiral Somerset Calthorpe scans the mist-shrouded minarets of Constantinople. The armistice of Mudrose is in effect. On the Galata Pier, a cluster of Ottoman officials in somber overcoats awaits a launch to ferry them out and formally receive the terms of their surrender. The fighting has ceased, but the final transaction is beginning. The long illness of the Ottoman state is over. The executors of the estate have arrived to inventory the remains. In the following months, occupation is methodical, thorough, and framed as fiduciary duty. The Ottoman Public Debt Administration is reactivated under Allied military supervision, its bureaucratic machinery repurposed from financial management to imperial governance. Its files are cross-referenced with military maps. British troops secure Constantinople, the strategic Dardanelles Straits, and the oil-rich Vilayet of Mosul. French forces occupy the Syrian coast. Italian soldiers patrol the Turkish Mediterranean. This is not a temporary martial law, it is the physical claiming of assets listed on a decades-old balance sheet. The scene shifts to the opulent but tense halls of the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. Here, financial claims are translated directly into territorial futures. The Ottoman delegation, led by Grand Vizier Damad Farid Pasha, arrives with appeals to President Wilson's ideal of self-determination. They are met with a cold, itemized invoice. The Allies present a staggering composite demand: reparations for the cost of the war and the full settlement of the pre-1914 sovereign debt. The figure is fantastical, impossible for a shattered state to pay. The subtext is the only text. Payment will be extracted in geography, not currency. The resulting document, the Treaty of Sevres of August 1920, is not a peace treaty but a liquidation order. It is the ultimate manifestation of the creditor's will. The Ottoman Empire is to be dissolved. The French mandate is granted Syria and Lebanon. The British mandate claims Palestine and Mesopotamia. Smyrna and its fertile hinterland are awarded to Greece. The strategic Dardanelles are placed under international control. All that remains for the Turks is a shrunken, landlocked rump in the barren Anatolian plateau, its economy still fettered to the debt administration. Every territorial amputation is justified, in Allied councils, by the original sin of Ottoman financial and moral bankruptcy. Yet from the rocky hills of Anatolia, a counter-force erupts that the accountants in Paris never factored into their equations. Mustafa Kemal, a defiant Ottoman general, rejects Sevres entirely and ignites a nationalist rebellion from the inland city of Ankara. The Turkish War of Independence is not merely a military conflict. It is a violent repudiation of the entire financial diplomatic settlement. Kemal's forces, battling Greek armies and confronting Allied garrisons, are fighting against the principle that a nation can be foreclosed upon by its creditors. The Anatolian plateau becomes a battlefield where bullets challenge bond yields. By the autumn of 1922, Kemal's armies have expelled the Greek invasion force, marched to the shores of the Aegean, and faced down a British contingent at Chanak. The Treaty of Sevres is ashes. The foreclosure has been violently interrupted. A new conference must be convened at Lausanne, Switzerland. But the ghost of the unpaid debt, the specter that started it all, still waits in the wings. The final reckoning of the ledger, opened in 1881, has yet to be closed. July 24, 1923. The Clock Room, Lausanne Palace Hotel, Switzerland. The scratch of a pen is deafening in the hushed salon. Ismet Inurnu, his brow furrowed in concentration, signs his name for the Republic of Turkey. Across the polished table, Lord Curzon of Britain and his fellow Allied delegates add their signatures with an air of conceded necessity. The Treaty of Lausanne is complete. In this moment, a new nation is born in international law, and an ancient empire is formally interred. Yet, as the diplomats exchange tense smiles, the lingering spirit of the Ottoman debt settles like fine dust upon the document, its final toll exacted not from Turkey, but from lands now called mandates. Lausanne is the antithesis of Sevres. Mustafa Kemal's stunning military victories have transformed the negotiation. Turkey is not a supplicant, but a sovereign equal. The humiliating amputations are gone. No Greek zone, no independent Armenia, no Allied-controlled straits. The Republic wins unequivocal recognition of its borders and its absolute independence. One formidable issue, however, bridges the old empire and the new republic, the crushing Ottoman public debt. For weeks, Inurnu, a master of stubborn, detail-oriented negotiation, clashed with Lord Curzon over this legacy. The Allies insisted the new Turkey assume the empire's entire financial obligation. Inurnu refused, advancing a powerful logical counter. The empire's wealth-generating territories, the oil fields of Mosul, the fertile plains of Syria, the holy lands of Palestine, had been stripped away and placed under British and French control. The debt, he argued, must follow the assets. It was a breathtaking tactical move, using the creditors' own logic of collateral against them. The resulting compromise was a surgical financial dissection of a dead empire. The colossal Ottoman debt was meticulously partitioned. Turkey agreed to service only a portion, calculated relative to the territory it retained. The remainder was allocated to the new political entities carved from the Ottoman carcass: Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Transjordan, and Iraq. But here lies the final, masterful move of imperial finance. These new states were not free. They were Class A mandates under the League of Nations, administered by Britain and France. Thus, the debt achieved its final, ironic form. For Turkey, it was a finite, manageable burden, the last vestige of a discarded past. For the Arab peoples of the Middle East, it was a birthmark of subjugation. The debt allocated to, say, Iraq became a permanent charge on its treasury, administered and collected by its British mandatory rulers. It was a mortgage on a house they did not yet own, taken out by a previous owner they never knew. The financial control perfected by the OPDA did not vanish. It was inherited. Britain, having purchased influence over decades through loans and wartime machinations, now solidified its grip through the mandate system, a mechanism of tutelage that guaranteed strategic dominance, unimpeded access to emerging oil resources, and the steady servicing of that eternal, inherited debt. As the Lausanne signatures dry, two destinies are sealed. In Ankara, there is the hard-won taste of sovereignty. The OPDA will soon be expelled from Turkish soil, its foreign officials departing, its books closed for good. A clean line is drawn. In Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, and Beirut, however, a different chapter opens. Their borders are the arbitrary lines of Sykes-Picot. Their economies are harnessed to sterling and the franc. Their political development is stunted by imperial priorities masquerading as benevolent guidance. The ledger begun in a gilded Constantinople hall in 1881 is finally closed, its totals transferred to new captive accounts. Britain did not purchase the Middle East in a single transaction. It acquired it through a patient century of financial entrapment, strategic default, and military diplomatic foreclosure. The debt was the trap. The Great War was the trigger. And the fractured, volatile map of the modern Middle East is the enduring and troubled settlement.